Okay, it looks like I'm live. It says I'm live. I presume I'm live. Whoever is out there and can confirm, that would be great. You can't vouch for that. You cannot vouch if you can. Oh, you can see me. Can you hear me? Just coming out of left channel. Okay, I can fix that. I can fix that. Okay. Properties. Cancel. How do I do this on OBS? Clearly, I'm prepared for this. We are. Balance. We'll hit mono on this sucker. That should come out on both channels now. All right. Okay, thanks AWC for verifying. Oh, Barack. Hey, okay. Hopefully it's not mono anymore. Or sorry, yeah, it's stereo, but it's basically I've switched it to a mono single track on both audio channels. Fixed. Sweet. All right. Close. All right, thanks for verifying that. Oh, just keep going. This is a weird thing to set up with. Usually, full disclosure, of course, I work at Microsoft as my day job, and usually we have when it's an official thing. This is an unofficial. This is after hours. Me doing it on a personal time. We usually have a team of really great folks who like manage all this production stuff. I'm just YOLOing this particular meetup, and of course, I decided to record this and put it up on YouTube. So this may be a funny thing to look back on. In any case, since we're already 5 minutes in, thanks for joining. You know, it was a bit of a interesting thing to get set up. I'll do a proper intro. My name is Ray Ko. I am a principal solutions specialist, architect, we want to call it, on the Azure Global Black Belt team as my day job. In particular, I work on the developer productivity team, which we are sort of like the intersection of Azure and GitHub, and we do things like platform engineering, DevOps. And tonight in particular, we're going to be talking about Copilot and a little bit of GitHub Advanced Security as well. Again, yeah, full disclaimer, I do work at Microsoft, so not trying to shill anything. You might expect otherwise from someone at Microsoft, but that is not my actual intent tonight. Just trying to show you how to use Copilot if you've not used it before, show you some, I guess, tips and tricks, and hopefully via chat, have a discussion about how do you roll this out or implement it in your organization. For some folks, it may be like, I just turn it on, right? Not so much when you work in a large organization. So hopefully there's some conversation around that. Okay, to that end, let me switch to mixed view. I haven't played with Stream Deck OBS in a while, so this may be a little bit of an awkward transition. That said, the agenda tonight for the first meetup for the Toronto GitHub Users Meetup Group. Hopefully you're not in Toronto only or Canadian only. Maybe you're joining us from abroad. Maybe you're watching this in the future. So thank you for doing that. The agenda tonight, overall, pretty straightforward. I know we've set it for about an hour and a half because I do tend to prattle. So hopefully I won't do so much of that tonight and get straight to the point. But we'll do like a general overview of Copilot, usage, general uses of it, the newest features that came out, extensions, agent mode, workspaces, autofix for code scanning. So that's the GitHub Advanced Security piece that's out there. And then, the last part will be more talking, less demoing in terms of like, how do you actually enable this? How do you roll this out? And so I'll kind of walk through from an enterprise perspective how to turn this on at a high level to enable for folks, whether you allow organizations to roll out GitHub Copilot for Business or Enterprise, and then how do you dish out licenses accordingly. And then part of rolling out is always a discussion about metrics. If you work in an organization that maybe a little hesitant, I would say, about rolling out some of these new agentic tools, that's one dimension of it. You may also be an organization that perhaps doesn't enjoy spending money on developers, right? Because you're spoiled. You got a lot of tools, right? What's another one for you? So we're discussing in terms of what does that look like in terms of metrics, measuring like the acceptance rate of the actual tool itself, and then really hopefully the discussion about like how do you actually measure developer productivity beyond commit rates and acceptance of the actual prompts or the responses from the prompts from the Copilot. I really said like we need to measure developer happiness, right? Whatever form that takes, it's a bit qualitative and amorphous, but it's a discussion organizations should have. I'd be somewhat surprised if it's not a dirty secret that your organization may not be doing that today, and now they're going to put it in place because they're buying your new tool. So we'll talk about that too. All right. Okay, so just go into Copilot in general. There's two main ways to get access to it in terms of someone's already issued a license. Either you've purchased it yourself off the street as an individual user, maybe you're part of GitHub Teams account, maybe you're part of an enterprise and therefore you're part of an organization. Maybe you're using a completely different source control platform, right? It might be Azure DevOps, could be GitLab, whatnot, but you still want to get access to Copilot. You can purchase that accordingly. Once it's been given to you, however you procured it, it's available first through your IDE. So the one in particular I'm going to show tonight is VS Code Insiders because I'm going to show agent mode later on. And currently that's only in preview inside VS Code Insiders. That said, Copilot is baked in, part of VS Code. So no worries there. You can get access to it accordingly. So in your IDE, in this case VS Code, here we've moved the experience. If you've used it in previous versions and then maybe you haven't touched it in a while, Copilot is actually available now to the right of your search bar. So you can kind of hit the drop-down menu. You'll notice that you'll have like open a regular chat, you'll open Copilot edits, maybe it's quick chat, maybe you want to do configure code completions. As I configure it, we do provide the facility for you to choose the underlying model and maybe some configuration boundaries around using the model. So right now the default's GPT-4o. Maybe you want to play around with Sonnet 3.7, which is in preview. It's up to you. You can edit it accordingly. That said, generally speaking, just click on the Copilot icon, and you notice to the right, this new blade kind of opens up. Your editor might change depending on how you've chosen to customize the configuration, but generally speaking, by default, if you've not made that change, it'll be to your right. The first experience is the chat experience. So this is like all the other agentic tools I'm sure you've tested, OpenAI and whatnot. It's the usual chat kind of experience, right? I ask it something, it gives me a response, and so I can do that. I've got this project already opened up here. This is part of a GitHub Advanced Security workshop that's should be out there, available as open source from the octodemo.org from the good folks at GitHub. And you can kind of check that out and run it through, or perhaps you've had a solution engineer from GitHub demo this for you. But in any case, it's like any other repository. We've got source code. I'm going to go into, I think it was the front end. Not the front end, it was storage service. Go source, main, Java. I can traverse accordingly, nothing new there. But maybe I want to ask it a question about a particular controller. So here's blob controller. If I open it up, I'm not going to install the Java extension pack on my machine. You'll notice a couple of things. You probably will notice a couple of things. Number one, whatever tab I have open, and I'm going to switch actually to full screen mode so that you don't, my face is not occupying unnecessary space. What you'll notice as a result is that whatever tab I have open, like current context anyways, that will be automatically added to the sort of the chat context here in the bottom right, as you can see. Okay, I can add additional files if I wanted to, like these files are saved elsewhere, but I could also drag, let's say, this storage service application Java file in here. And so I can add additional context in here. What I can do then is I can ask it questions like, what is the blob controller doing? So part of Copilot, I mean, the immediate sort of use case is ask it questions about code, have it write code for me. But sort of the beginner uses of it for me, or if I were to see it as someone new joining a team, either net new to a company or switching departments or something like that, joining a new team, is maybe you want to acclimatize yourself to the project or the source code within that particular project or line of business that you're working with. And so you may want to ask some questions because MVCs in general are more or less the same, but as a project grows, as patterns and practices change over time, the structure of it may not be exactly what it should be. The idiomatic way of doing things, organization will choose to do things differently. So I may want to ask, what is this particular controller? The naming of it might have been wrong. I mean, there is conventions for that. You're supposed to stick to it, but again, you may not, or your organization may not have. So you can, I guess, first use case, onboarding, level setting, using it as a tool for, again, you can see it from the perspective of someone junior or someone net new to a team, ask questions about the repo. I don't always have to sort of have control over the context, direct context over the repository, or sorry, the files that are open in order for Copilot to get access or have that grounded context to what I'm doing. I can also use these built-in, you can call them functions, you can call them helpers, whatever you want to call it. I can actually do it like an at workspace sub command, you could call it too. And what this will do is locally, your IDE or the Copilot extension really is going to understand that I'm working on this particular directory project and be able to give it the capability or ask it to check the project that I'm working on and grab the relevant files for the context I'm working on. So in this case, what I'm trying to showcase is that, okay, I've got the blob controller file open. All right, that's cool. What I would probably want is for it to also know, maybe there's a blob model, maybe there's some additional files for it to have context over, and I don't want to manually add into it because it's good to have an escape hatch and to micromanage the robot, so to speak, but you may, not know how to navigate. Again, you're new to the team. So at workspace, maybe the file structure is messed up. I want to ask it, is there a blob model somewhere? You don't have to ask it. It'll figure that out. And what it will do as a result is using that at workspace command, locally kind of collect information about the workspace you're working in, determine, hey, is there a blob model or words that sort of semantic meaning behind the scenes, and be able to grab or add those additional references to it. So here, to use references, use the blob controller, which was the file that I had open, and then it was able to find my local sort of folder structure, file system, the blob.java file. So yep, it's there. It also provides some pretty good explanation of what that model is. And at the end of this, generally speaking, usually has a link to the blob file itself. I may be able to just click on blob, no, it just mentions the blob class. Here, blob.java, there it is. So I can click on that to kind of quickly navigate to it if I don't know how to traverse the file system. Cool. The next thing I want to kind of discuss, since we're in this chat experience, is to note that I have the capability, again, when we talk about micromanaging the robot, so to speak, the ability to target a particular model. Mileage may vary for all these. There are models that are good at sort of thinking or planning through. There are ones that are specifically tuned for coding, so 3.5 Sonnet, 3.7 Sonnet, etc. And then they've got like your sort of generalist models as well, right? So the GPT family of things. Some are better and faster and whatnot, but you may want to play around with that. I've had really good sort of experience with 3.7 Sonnet, so if you've got a chance to try that out, I do suggest it. Yeah, you have that capability to micromanage it. I'll swing back, but I want to also notice that the experience between chat and Copilot edits, it may be a little bit confusing of why the other. I think over time we're going to converge them. The biggest thing to note is that Copilot edits here has the capability of directly editing your files, whereas chat is all just the experience of back and forth chatting here on the right hand side, right? So I ask it a question or ask it something, it responds back, but doesn't have agency to modify my local file structure or do or act on my local system. Copilot edits does. And then the other thing I wanted to note just ahead of time, not to get too far ahead of myself, you also have the capability of choosing a different model in edits, so it doesn't transfer over. So the model I chose in chat doesn't show up in Copilot edits. Okay, so you might want to choose that accordingly. And it might be also important when you talking about thinking through or planning, so you might want to change the model in that sense. And then you can also choose a different mode for edits. This will converge over time. There's the traditional edit mode where it can work on your file system directly and do things specific. Agent mode will pass through multiple agent steps, so to speak. Each has its own agency to do things. It'll go through a planning phase, think about what it needs to do, and then execute accordingly. So that's a new mode that was introduced not too long ago. All right. So that's sort of like the initial dip my toe in the water. How do I work with chat? There are a number of things I can do here as well. I can, ask it questions about maybe I'm not a Java developer. I'm new to the team. I do development, but perhaps I'm not too familiar with the constructs of this. How do classes in Java differ from Ruby classes, if at all? Maybe my context is Ruby development, not Java. It should be able to provide me, again, coding related, but information here. So I don't have to context switch between this and say, my favorite tutorial online or a reference manual, a book we might have on the shelf behind you, or switch over to ChatGPT itself. You can ask questions directly in here, and it'll provide you with the grounded sort of context of the files that we work on here, right? All right. Other things to note before I move on in terms of the inline experience as well is the fact that what was I going to say? The history in the chat is only available to the underlying model whenever I ask questions, right? So if I clear this out as an example, so I go clear, that's it. That history is gone. It won't be sent, and only a finite number of the previous chat messages will be sent along to Copilot. None of that's stored on sort of the back end. It's all sort of stateless, transactional. I send it one request, it sends me back a response, and then that's it. It's gone into the ether in that sense. It's guaranteed on Copilot Business and Enterprise that we're not going to retrain. So keep that in mind when you're switching to an organization or your management asks you how secure is this thing. That'll be a level or a dimension of security. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to collapse the chat window for now, only because, and I'm going to collapse the File Explorer. I'm going to talk about ways to kind of interact with Copilot inside the IDE. So maybe the chat experience is cool, but maybe I just want to write code and have it sort of live or work with it like a living document, so to speak, right? So I can pop up the chat sort of experience right here. I can ask it, I don't know why I would do this, but add an additional user class here. I want to build out a user model that takes an address. I can't type tonight, and email address, as well as first name and last name. So I can ask it inline here. That's one way to go about it. So it'll go and reason about what it needs to do using 3.7 Sonnet. Generally faster than this. Back. Questions in chat while we're watching paint dry in this particular scenario. But it'll go. So give it a chance to do its thing there. I haven't tried this if I can do two things at once, whether or not it'll mess it up. I can also, in here, say, I got a blob matching there. Maybe I want to create a documentation, create a delete endpoint. Then you'll see there's a tab ahead kind of experience. I'm hitting tab. Okay, and I'll just kind of override it. Earlier. Well, that was a funky experience. Here it assumed that I wanted to create a download one for whatever reason, but you'll notice that it does sort of code ahead and create that for you in line. The experience, of course, was that, and what I wanted to show is that I can actually hit and create sort of to implement this endpoint, write the documentation in line in here, and then you can also follow JS doc styles or Java doc style styling for documentation in there. Okay, let's go back to this. You in chat. This seems to have failed out on me. Let me try again. Write a user's model class here. Right. Came back with something at least. Okay. The point being is that the experience will be different accordingly. I can either do it in line, which may be more conducive of how you like to work with things. Of course, this particular case was a bad example because I wrote this inline in the wrong model file, right? So I wrote it in the blob one. But the idea is the same. It's able to take context and generate, in general, what is considered, sort of boilerplate stuff for you. So some improvements in terms of time to writing code, etc. there. So that's sort of another experience itself. You can also write comments in line for it to generate the code as well, so that you can do good documentation as you go and use that as a way to communicate with Copilot. The next level on top of that, so I'm just going to actually undo that user model because I didn't want that. I'll do Copilot edits as I was showing earlier. And what I wanted to say is okay, so here's going to be a little bit of a difference in terms of the experience with edits. As to why it is, it's likely the endpoints or the implementation of it might be different locally, but code base, the hashtag code base syntax here, and the @workspace command in the chat are essentially synonymous functionality. This is likely converge considering their edit is in preview, and it's likely not to clobber over the experience that exists in chat. That's just me reasoning about why that is. In any case, I can do splat or hashtag codebase and ask, please always be polite to your robot overlords before they take over. Please create me a user model and a user controller. I'm keeping this pretty high level just to watch how edit works. So what it should be able to do is it reason about what it needs to do accordingly. And what it's going to do is create a user class and a user controller and add that to my file system. So if I actually check here, what you didn't see because I had the file explorer collapsed, is that you're going to see these additional sort of UI prompts or notifications to show you that, in fact, we have created files via the agent. You're going to see, where it has modified. So the things in gold, yellow are modified files via the agent, and then the ones in green are net new files via the agent, and that they haven't necessarily been accepted yet. There are a couple ways to accept what it's done. So I'm just going to click on the user model itself. You'll notice that I can say keep or undo the changes in this file directly. I can broadly accept everything. This is the sort of the YOLO mode without reviewing it, and just say keep everything that's been generated, these two files. I can just review, either step through the files that have been created in that sense, and accept what's been created in here as well. So I can say keep or undo accordingly. All right. I can also hit the diff mode just to see if it was already an existing file, to see, again, just like Git provides, the difference and the differences in terms of the file, what was added and removed, etc. I want to just keep, and then I already kept that one, and I can just say keep for all of them over there and just say done. So then that starts a new editor mode. All that was done for me. So if you hate writing boilerplate code, that's a good way to kind of get started. Keep in mind, I've accepted the prompt, or sorry, not the prompt, the response of what was generated for me by Copilot, but the file itself has not been saved. So this regular UI, which you see up here in terms of the dot and then the right through to close the tab itself, still applies accordingly. Right? So it's all good there. I'm going to save the actual file itself so that it registers in source control. Then my usual flow kind of goes through in terms of committing the changes, etc. I'm going to commit. I'll roll this back later, but because I don't want to save it in my demo. But I can also hit this commit message or generate commit message with Copilot and implement user management and blob download functionality, right? So it can do all that for you. I'm going to just undo that, unravel what I've done if I want to, and then commit and then push the changes up accordingly. Which then brings me to an important point, is that the Copilot is there to assist you, right? It's not authoritative over the code. When you commit code into your repo, that's under your account, not Copilot. There's no way to see the lines of code were generated by Copilot in that sense. What I closed out earlier, I saw, and I thought I was go back to it, but then I hit done. What does occur too sometimes when you're generating this, depending on the policies on your organization, is that you may block code that matches identical code that it's been trained off of, right? To block IP infringement or copyrighted code. Sometimes that can be a bit of a pain because some of it is generic code that is undifferentiated, let's say. But it's there to protect yourself, your organization, etc. Should you choose that guardrail in place. I'm not a legal expert. There is a GitHub Copilot legal site for you to check out for more information. I did not include it in the links, but I'll do it after fact for the video once it's posted online. And also when we set up a repository for the meetups for demos, it'll be included in there as well. All right. So that's the general sort of experience here. I don't see any questions in chat. So chat, I mean, if you do have questions, drop it in there. In the future, we'll set up some kind of, I guess, Discord so that you can ask questions live or for Teams or something like that, since that's all I know. All right. That's the initial use of it. Other use cases, of course, I don't know if there's like a reaction for our hands up or whatnot on chat, but anyone love writing unit tests? I want to assume, I can't really see, of course, that no one loves writing unit tests. I presume. I personally don't. And so the next thing, kind of use case, easy one to kind of think of is write unit tests for the things that I've created, right? So what the edit Copilot mode didn't do, because I was explicit in terms of what I wanted to do, it didn't think above and beyond what to go ahead and create for me. So if I switch to agent mode, generally, again, it's experimental, so this may blow up in my face in that sense. I'm going to now ask it to write a new controller, and I'm going to create like a book controller of some sort. Yeah, I see it in chat now. Love having unit tests is what I presume. Hate writing them. Yeah, I would agree. Yes, I do love having them. I don't like writing them. Same. So what I would say in terms of edit, what I can do is like now write me a book, a controller, and model. Let's see what we do. I'm going to be generic, right? And see what it thinks from an agent perspective to go ahead and do. Notice I'm also running in GPT 4.0 for this. I may want to switch and try a different model in a sec just to see how quick of a response I get back from the model, and then also the quality of the code that it generates. So here it only generated the controller and the book model, which is interesting. So I can actually go to the book.java. Here, created it. Maybe I want to redo that. I'm gonna undo all of that. Yes, undo it, just because Eddie. Close out these files here. And I want to ask it the same question. Now write a book controller model. See what Claude provides me. This is usually where I prefer the in-person meetup, where as we're waiting, it'd be a good chance to interject some questions. So here it's generating the model. Looks like Claude might, or at least our particular endpoint of it might be a little run. And also, oh no, there are API limits when it's in preview on a per user account. So that could generally be the reason for slowness this evening. Claude, generally pretty fast. Okay, it didn't do what I was expected it to. I've given it generic stuff, and it's been pretty helpful in the past. Just create the unit tests. Okay, now create me the unit tests, and while you're at it, write the cd cucumber for this as well. Then run and run app. The one thing that agent mode is capable of doing, it not only does it have the agency to create the files themselves on my local file system, but it also has the ability or agency again to run things in my terminal. So if I open up terminal, it should do something in here as well. Waiting for it to go and run, create the tests with everything else. This is where I presume I'm hitting rate limits. Why demoing a preview or experimental thing is always dodgy, but of course, good thing that I've recorded this for all of history to see. Right. So you notice it's going through this and creating the unit test and the BDD tests as well. For this, it's adding stuff to the POM file. So not only is it creating, again, the model and the controller, it's also adding the packages required in order to run the tests too. In chat, let's see, Barack again. Sonnet sometimes slow down to a crawl. Maybe Anthropic needs to get more GPUs compared to OpenAI stuff, though tends to give higher quality code output in my experience. Yep, no arguments there. I mean, GPUs are what they are at the moment in terms of supply and demand, etc. So mileage may vary accordingly. Plus, it's also a preview endpoint that we're not kind of turned on full on production. It's not posted, as far as I know, on our current infrastructure for GPT-4 models. So mileage may vary. Okay, so created the BDD. I'm gonna say keep, and then it's gonna continue to create BDD tests there. I keep that as well, and just move on. We'll come back to that and see if it actually runs my terminal as expected, just for the sake of time. All right, so if I go back now to agenda, okay, other things I want to talk about. So extensions. So I covered agent mode. Agent mode is, as you see it sort of down here, what it's capable of doing, running through reasoning, planning out what it needs to go and do. It has the agency or the agent mode to run things in my terminal, which is still operating and going against. Extensions, I kind of skipped over that. Oops, straight to the file. Extensions themselves are another way for you to build capabilities or leverage capabilities that are in the marketplace. So think of extensions as plugins, right? You can write them yourself for your own organization. Usually the use cases that I use anyways from a platform engineering or DevOps perspective, maybe there is particular knowledge or things that you can streamline that you might want to pass off to an agent or a script and have that agent be able to be invoked via an @agent syntax inside the chat. So I can go like if I go back to actual chat itself, I think I have it installed in this machine. Yeah, all these commands here are agents. And in particular, I created one here called GPT test. This is one internally that testing around. The endpoint isn't working, so it's a bad example in that sense. But this is like any API endpoint that I can call. The thing with extensions, you can kind of think of it like a full-on UI chatbot framework in that sense, where we already have the UI interface in terms of embedded inside your IDE. This sort of, again, the chat experience you have on right here in VS Code could be, the same chat experience inside IntelliJ, Visual Studio Proper, NeoVim, and all the other, Copilot enabled IDEs that are out there. This provides, again, that ability to bake it in, so to speak, and install it into Copilot so that you have the UI layer that's available. You have a model, a language model behind the scenes that's powered by Copilot, accessible to you out of the box, so you don't have to spin up your own instance. And then, because it's just an API endpoint that you can self-host, you can do all the other business logic you would typically do for your application. So you can retrieve information from a database. You can query a graph, database if you've got one for your cloud infrastructure, as an example. You can have your, your backend tied to, say, reading like a Terraform state file to give the Copilot additional context in terms of the state you're looking for. You can do virtually anything. You can even plug it into, say, your preferred file store system to read project docs, etc., and integrate that. You can do that. It's customizable. You can do it anything you want in terms of that. Key thing is it's just a GitHub app behind the scenes. There's some configuration that you need to do in terms of turning it on, and then there'll be another future session to look at that more in depth to build an agent. But then that capability is now available to the Copilot to use and leverage and call through first. Okay, so I can ask it a number of questions here. I'm going to actually switch back to GitHub agent, and I can actually ask it about knowledge bases, which is another enterprise feature. It's going to go grab it. So what you saw here is an installed GitHub agent. Okay, so you can think of it as a subcommand, but it's another API endpoint that I can call. I can then call the knowledge base subcommand of that given agent. And then what it's able to do is, in terms of knowledge bases, be able to read from a repo that I've created documentation in form of either text files or Markdown or additional code that it has already gone and indexed for me on my behalf because I've marked it as a knowledge base repository, and be able to provide things like, what is our style guidelines? What are our security policies? Are we meeting certain compliance regulations based on documentation in a given repo? So I was going to pick on this COBOL knowledge base one, and I'm going to say, like, what are our COBOL? I know you're asking, like, why are we doing COBOL? I mean, it happens. I'm sure there's some instance of it in a closet in your organization, especially if you work in financial services out there. What are our COBOL best practices for our enterprise? And so this is one way. Right now, today, the way it's exposed is that you kind of have to explicitly opt in and call it in order to get information back. So I'll find you information about COBOL best practice enterprise knowledge base. That information. Oh, it's probably because I'm using Sonnet. Let me 4.0 ask it the same question again. Let's see how it goes. It's able to get that information back. What happens is that the index repository puts it into a vector database with semantic re-ranking behind the scenes. I believe the implementation is Azure AI Search. And so what this will do is that it will query against that database, get the information back, and then parse it back through Copilot, and then generate the response accordingly. So all this is saved in a Markdown file that is used as our sort of enterprise best practices documentation. And then you can also, it'll provide you an annotation to the source document in particular that we're referring to. So here, I just created this. It is not a good representation of what good COBOL code should be. I've never written COBOL in my life. Kind of skimmed through it, worked on projects where smarter people than I have been sort of the guiding light to this. But this was just an example of it indexed everything in here. It's able to pull the information out. So if I asked about project documentation specifically in that chat, it'll provide that information back accordingly, and so forth. Okay. The funny thing is I actually used Copilot to generate this doc and then feed it back in. So again, reasons why it's probably not a good example, but you can use it to bootstrap in that sense, or create the boilerplate for whatever your enterprise's best practices are, if you don't already have them. Which, again, another dirty secret, you might not have this documentation available today. Right. So that's sort of the extension experience. It's going to manifest itself like this, the @GitHub agent in particular here. You can build your own, which is the first kind of way to go about this or to understand how it works, at least the way I like to learn about it. But then, if you're in the sort of my mode, I didn't have the page already up, but you can go to like GitHub Copilot extensions. There is, in fact, a marketplace. Intro. I can go to documentation with build an extension, build your own, or you can explore extensions. By the way, when you build an extension, like you could be a third-party builder. So if you can think of some kind of integration and make your own sort of micro SaaS or whatever is popular today too, you can do so, and then essentially GitHub becomes your marketplace to market and sell your product accordingly. But here out of the box, of course, you're going to see that there are already extensions available here in the marketplace. A number of them. Mermaid chart one is a pretty fun one to use if you use mermaid charts. It helps you to create them. If you want to create teams, agents or the build kit to kind of customize and tap into and extend to Microsoft 365 Copilot. So that one in particular, again, from a project management perspective, I think is your best bet to start. I haven't tried it myself to get sort of the project doc specifications that live in, say, OneDrive or something like that in Microsoft 365. Might be a good way to kind of integrate in that sense. List goes on and on. You can see here. So these are the ones that are readily available today by third-party developers. These aren't necessarily official GitHub extensions in here. These are, again, this one's made by JFrog, etc. So it's all in here for you. Okay. This marketplace, again, today, like if you're never familiar with GitHub Marketplace, this is also where you install additional apps to maybe link to another system that you have. Maybe you're not using GitHub Issues and you're using something like Linear, right? You can acquire these apps here. Shout out to Barack and his company for the ones who have introduced me to Linear. Okay, so yeah, those are all the additional things you can install. Okay, all just the GitHub app under the hood, but you can opt in your particular app to have access to the Copilot API behind the scenes for your organization or for your particular extension that you're building. All right, so that's extensions. Copilot workspaces. Okay, so this is a cool one. So there's kind of different streams in that sense about agent modes and we've got one agent experience here in Copilot edits, and then we've got essentially another stream of agents in workspaces. This is still, I would say, an emerging area, and we're doing a lot of research and studies around this about what is the right fit, and likely it's not going to be a one size fit all, right? What I mean by that, some folks live and die by the IDE. That's kind of me. I'm a little bit set in my ways. I enjoy terminal, like command line, like all this here. For other folks, I'm just going to switch over to github.com. Perhaps you want to be able to write things differently. And so one way of going about this is, if I just go on a PR, for example, may or may not be the best way to enter into this. Essentially, what I want at a high level is, some kind of task or some kind of thing to work on. And I need to build that thing or that task I want to provide Copilot a way of understanding what is it I'm trying to do. So here, in this case, there's already PR that's already been generated for me. All right, but I want to actually implement this. So this is enough information, I would say, or should be enough information for some agent to kind of take over and build on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open in Workspace here. So if you create an issue or if you have a PR open, generally speaking, there is an open workspace, GitHub Copilot workspace, to the right-hand side of that screen. And so what you should be able to see here now is that it is able to actually start generating behind the scene a GitHub Copilot, a GitHub code space. Not a, but this itself is the GitHub Copilot workspace. So what happens behind the scenes? GitHub spins up a code space, which is like an ephemeral, containerized an environment that has full IDE experience. just been kind of abstracted away from you in this experience. It's providing into that space the code that it requires to work on, the context of what it's working on. Essentially, Copilot has that as the localized environment that I can do stuff in, run a particular language, install the tooling, all that, etc. So it's starting it up behind the scenes. What this provides for me then is what it'll do is it'll start generating the tasks for me, right? So this could be the full on, so first step or phase where it thinks about, oh, what are the files I need to create? And it'll start generating sort of that thought process of what needs to occur. Then there'll be an implementation phase where it will actually start executing each or implementing each of those line items for that project planning thinking phase it did at first, right? And then you can generate and work on that implementation. And then after that, you can actually review and commit and add it back into your workflow accordingly. Along the way, each of the steps, even in the planning stage, each of the line items that says that it's going to write a unit test file. It's going to write a particular Go line of script or create a new file, etc. You have the ability to kind of interject there and modify what that step is, move it into a different order, add a new one, reword it because it maybe didn't have the meaning behind what you expected it to do, and so forth. So you can do that. Even in the implementation phase, when it creates code, you have the ability, because you're in control, to modify the file before it gets committed, or suggest another way to approach that file, give it more detail in terms of what it needs to do in terms of writing the actual code for you. So you're not going to be writing. You're going to be writing less direct code. You're going to be doing more management, I would say, in the end of what gets generated. So the level of abstraction, the experience of creating apps, etc., kind of moves up accordingly. And so that's the key thing to kind of think about. Codespace is still spinning up behind the scenes. Likely it's because it's a preview in that sense. This particular environment might have been the wrong example to show, but still going. If it has, I don't know what to put. No, nothing there. Okay. We'll come back to that one as well. Let me go to chat for the time being and go back to this as well. Okay, Gene, you're asking, how do I make Copilot do my tickets and run my tests and pipelines so I can just kick back and relax? Yeah, that's the Nirvana state. So kind of the same experience in that sense. If I just, I'm going to exit out of that one. Let me back a number of times. Usually the entry point for something like this is an issue, right? Or you could have a I don't have any projects here. Let's create one on the fly. Yeah, Kanban style. Let's go with that. Let's do this live. Okay, here we go. Here I'm going to create a new item. Add item. I'm going to say create user controller, something like that. Let's say that's say blank issue. User controller. I want to create a user controller that allows me to create. I'm just gonna be lazy. CRUD a user. That's all. That's all I really want. Is credit and have it figure out what it is that I want. So I click on it, and I convert this to an issue. Already be is it not showing up? This is a me problem. I've forgotten how to actually navigate through this. If we go back to projects, nope. Go back to repositories, which was Gaz workshop. Issues. Create user controller. I create a port. Oh, here it is. So here's the kind of same thing as a PR, because like a PR is just an issue essentially behind the scenes as an object. It's already been added to my project board. This is materialized in that particular view I had. I have the choice again, kind of the same thing. Like this is all agentic kind of workflow. I can choose open workspace. I can open in Copilot agent mode. Let's do this one. I didn't for this, but let's do that. So it's going to open up a GitHub Copilot. A GitHub code space. I always trip over the naming. So again, code space, if you're not familiar with it, it's an ephemeral containerized environment that GitHub spins up for you. So let's just say you want a dev environment. You don't want to pollute your local machine with 18 different versions of JavaScript and Java all in the same box. I can create and customize one for the right development environment. Here in GitHub Copilot agent mode in GitHub.com, what I'm able to do is spin up, again, this sort of ephemeral environment. It's got all the things that I would need. I think the default is running on a 2-core machine with like 8 gigs of RAM, details. You can create larger ones, of course. But what this does, again, it creates the clone repo version of what I have here, open up agent mode, and based on that task I had earlier, this operated correctly because I've not actually run this before in this particular demo environment. What it did is it uses this information here, which is super vague, by the way. Like I could have done better than this. It'll use that as a way to generate the associated tasks that I need to for that environment. And at github.com, it needs all. It's probably still booting all that stuff. Yeah, activating extensions. So it's running for that all that for me behind the scenes. So in terms of the easy mode, so you can sit back and relax, as you mentioned, Gene. That's what's going to happen. It's going to create all those steps, generate all that stuff. I could open in workspace. Again, that experience will be different. This one is, again, IDE based experience. Workspace itself is a different experience in terms of how it goes and operates and does that. Okay, so that would be the direction to go in, do that. Feedback styles, we're running tests and such after it has generated code. So yeah, if I go switch back to my IDE, it should be good by now. What you'll notice here is like the feedback loop, right? None of that changes, in my opinion. You're still going to run your unit tests and what have you after it generates code. I'm going to say, okay, continue. And what happened here, so this is going back to earlier when I was running this with Sonnet. It had that step where I asked it to, run the actual application and the tests, etc. This is the command that it comes up with in terms of what it needs to do in terms of doing that. So check version, because probably don't have it installed. I don't have Java installed on my local machine. So that's the other thing too, right? It's able to discern, okay, how am I messing this up? It's able to get the information back from the terminal to then get additional context to say, hey, you don't have Java installed. Here's how you would install it, right? So it goes through all those steps for me. So it's capable of doing. So presuming I had Java installed on my box, because it's a fresh Mac that I had and install it during this time, it would have those additional kind of steps that will run for me, get the feedback loop. It'll be able to pass it back into while edit mode, and it's sort of not an infinite loop. There is an upper limit in terms of how many times, at least today in preview, it's able to do, or experimental mode, where it kind of goes to that cycle of whatever in the terminal in terms of error comes up, feeds back into edits, then it kind of rewrites and updates accordingly. It'll go through a number of iterations in there in that sense. Let's see. I think I missed one of your questions. Workspace is a feature of GitHub Next, right? Yeah. So GitHub Next being sort of I think we used to call it like GitHub X, and now we're calling it Next. Sort of like the experimentation realm of things that are coming out in the future in GitHub. So yeah, currently it's a Next project in that sense. We also have something called Spark, which currently is generating sort of web UI experience. That's also another Next project, but Workspace, GitHub Copilot Workspace is a feature or a project inside GitHub Next. The last question there, you don't know how to navigate it either since we use Jira. Yeah. So Jira, there's Jira integration. So it's not really a question, it's a statement. Don't know how to navigate GitHub in terms of issues. Like I was fumbling there for a sec. Yeah, if you're using a different project management tool or a different issue tracker, again, your mileage is going to vary because in order for you to spin up Copilot Workspace, agent mode, that your code or your repository must live in github.com, right? Because that's where it's able to generate, again, the code space behind the scenes for you in that sense. If you want to use Copilot edits, this can be associated to any repository or code base or file that you have locally on your machine. Edits is tied to the IDE. The IDE is tied to whatever environment you're actually working in. So this could be tied to like a remote SSH environment. So you have like a virtual machine that you're actually remoting into. So if you, which I mean, if I'm actually in code spaces here, I can go to SSH remote SSH. I have it installed in here. I don't have it installed on here because SSH. So taking a slight detour, there are additional extensions that allows you to remote into. Let's do the pre-release. Remote into a remote environment. There are a number of them. You can remote into a Docker container. You can remote into WSL if you're on a Windows machine, so that you can work in a quasi Linux environment. It's a full-on Linux environment, but like it's local inside, so like a Matroska doll, like Linux inside of Windows itself. And then you can also remote into, like, say if you have a setup like me, I've got it's not turned on at the moment, but I've got a server behind me that I run a headless Ubuntu instance. I can remote into that box. And so with this extension installed now, presumably, I can do remote SSH and add a new SSH host. I'm not going to pop this up because I'm not going to show you the IP address and stuff like that with my remote machine, but it's the usual SSH stuff, right? I can give it the IP address or DNS name of a remote box. If I've got a VPN set up, it can use internal private DNS to route to it, etc. You can provide it the user credential. You can modify your SSH config file to use a different key, all that good stuff. The endpoint being is that the terminal experience down here would be connected, and this whole IDE, mind you, the context of the IDE is in that remote machine. It'll install a VS Code server on that remote box and give you all the facilities to do all this. So super useful. And again, allows you to leverage Copilot in that sense without the code necessarily being in github.com, so the repository. But any of the advanced features that you want on github.com, of course, like spinning up workspaces based off an issue or a PR. Of course, your code has to exist or live inside github.com today in the browser experience, but from IDE, it shouldn't matter too much in that sense. A little message here in chat. Remote SSH is super useful, but it sucks that you have to reinstall all extensions on the remote box. Yes and no. Depending on how the tool works itself, you can actually just set up syncing, wherever it is here, backup and sync settings for your IDE. But yes, contextually, some of the extensions must be reinstalled onto the remote box just by nature of how that extension works. So the IDE here is, of course, installed on my local machine. Some of the extensions that I leverage are installed on my local box, and I can have access to them locally. All right, but some of the other extensions, I'm trying to think of one in particular. I think even the Copilot extension. Yeah, Copilot extension has to be reinstalled on the box remotely because it has to be grounded in that remote box in order for it to run and execute. Okay. Not bad for a first meetup, I think. Okay, workspaces we covered. Oh, Copilot autofix. I'll do this quickly and then we'll get into rollouts or rolling it out in your environment. So we had some environments going. It was doing its thing. Here, I'm just going to go back to this quickly because we're running it. Notice that because we use agent mode, I kind of left it alone. It did its thing. Copilot edits, it thought through what it needed to do. It's created some files for me on my behalf. It's running through all of that based on just the PR that I had sitting there waiting for me in there. And it can also be generated off issues as well, right? So it'll reason about, you can kind of let it do its thing, go grab a coffee, come back. This is Java project settings, ignore that, that's not related. Come back and then kind of do the human management thing, right? Check to see, does this look good? This is model dependent, right? I'm using GPT 4.0 here in the bottom. You may want to switch to Sonnet, etc. So, mileage may vary in that sense. I think soon enough around the corner, because the cycles for models are getting shorter and shorter, I would presume that it's commoditized. You don't really want to micromanage that and just kind of go with whatever the default one as they get better and better. So, but you do have that escape hatch. Okay. So I went and did those updates based on I just said create me user controller and created the model, created the service, etc. So all that was done for you. What I wanted to show was a different way of using Copilot without. If you don't have a Copilot license, it's cool. You do need GitHub Advanced Security in this particular case, because what I'm going to show doesn't really matter which repo I use. Got a bunch of security problems here. GAS, is our built-in sort of advanced security against your repository perspective. I'm going to go into a code scanning example. I'm just going to clear text. I'm going to just pick one. What you can see here is that GitHub Copilot autofix as part of this. So GitHub Advanced Security, it is able to generate alerts based on tooling that you may have incorporated. GitHub Advanced Security itself is built in, so it does static code analysis kind of thing. Checks for security vulnerabilities based off of CodeQL, which is a way to treat your code base as like a database and query for reversal of input parameters across your code down to maybe like a database call to make sure it's been sanitized and stuff like that. So prevent SQL injection attacks is the usual example I run through. In this case here, Copilot autofix, because the alert was generated, because the alert has the context in terms of what vulnerability is it exposing and where it found the vulnerability, it was able to at least come up with, I don't know, I haven't checked through this one, come up with a way to remediate this particular vulnerability. So what does this do? So what? Who cares, right? Well, one, perhaps I'm a neophyte to security and don't really understand. Like here on the right hand side, you're gonna see like security weaknesses. Like what is this related to? So I can read through if I have problems sleeping at night, reading through this particular vulnerability. It gives me what does it do? How does it attack? Or like what is the potential risk of this? Okay, not the super important part. The important part is that it created the solution for me. It also provides me the context of how do I upskill my ability as a developer or potentially a security analyst, either new or senior or whatnot. How do I uplevel my skill so I get an understanding quickly as to what's going on and what is an approach to fix this? Okay. What this also provides me is a way to commit this to a new branch, and then the same stuff that I saw earlier, right? Like I can create a new branch, an existing branch, and then from there I can spin up a code space or clone it to my local environment. I can use GitHub Copilot to further enhance or fix this because this may be good but not great, right? And so forth. So this is GitHub Copilot autofix, where if it finds an alert, it means that it should have fixed the alert. If it was enough context and understanding, or it was not hyper complex, because some security exposures could be. Give it enough of a solution for you to like remediate pretty much automatically. Okay. The additional thing too is you can also track the history of when this particular vulnerability was introduced, right? Who did it? So David Sanchez on my team. Shout out David. This is of course a contrived demo, right? He deliberately, or at least we cloned it from another demo from the Octo demo or GitHub folks, a way to kind of generate this attack. But let's say I remediated this, like I committed to a new branch, fixed it, looked good, submitted the PR, accepted it, and then this exposure goes away. Advanced Security will pick that up, remove this alert altogether from the list, the backlog of 162 vulnerabilities are created in this repo. Okay, but in theory, maybe I'm the this is probably a real world scenario. I'm the bad developer, came back from vacation and then recommitted code and like reintroduced this vulnerability. You have the audit log to see that, and then you could go back in history and see, oh, David fixed it. I can reapply his changes, roll back, and also see all of the things that were done to fix it accordingly. Or run another auto fix to bump it, right, or to fix it. Okay. Not a Copilot thing, but I just want to mention it as well. You can turn on Dependabot as well. This creates a graph on all your dependencies. This is not a Copilot feature. This has been around for a while, but this is an easy one to kind of do today in your organization, right? So you turn on Dependabot, it creates a dependency graph that is able to do the same thing, which provides you, information and context of the dependencies that you're using. where is the vulnerability? What is the vulnerability? To which versions are they affected in? When was what is a good patch version to implement? Now, some things about this that aren't out of the box or included in all plans is the auto remediate for Dependabot. No, actually, it does provide the PR. My mistake. So there are Dependabot PRs in here. Here's one, for example. This is available, so it'll try to bump your version. What it doesn't include is like it'll submit a PR for you to bump a version, but it doesn't out of the box provide you, like, let's say the API change from what do we go from 0.19 super old version to 207. Like there's bound to be some kind of API update change in this Vue CLI service, as an example. In this one, I don't think it has it in here. Probably didn't detect it, but it does have the facility to not only tell you that, hey, you got to bump this version because of these vulnerabilities that it's related to, but also in these particular files, I want to also include commits that will change the API, the method calls for that particular library that you're using, as well along with it. All right. Whirlwind tour within less than 10 minutes of that. Usually goes a little longer when I normally do it, but just wanted to talk about that as a feature, and hopefully have that as a more robust demonstration in a future meetup in person as well. Okay, so that was Whirlwind Tour autofix for code scanning. So we create an alert is detected. We can then go ahead and remediate it um, with an autofix of some sort. Then show security campaigns. Again, future session we can discuss that further, where you can kind of group those campaigns together and burn them down, part of a sprint or ongoing task. Yeah, that's sort of Copilot at a high level. Maybe there will be questions in the future. Hopefully, get to them. Not particularly good with YouTube comments and whatnot. So if you're working in an organization that has a representative from GitHub, or maybe you have a sales team, or you've worked with the Azure Gold Black Belts or any other technical specialist at Microsoft GitHub, feel free to reach out to them. They'd be more than happy to kind of run you through some of these scenarios as well, one-to-one. For your organization, not one-on-one in terms of yourself and that technical specialist at like a coffee shop or something. Okay, rolling out. So enabling for individuals, enterprises, and org. So there are different levels to procure. This is really what I meant by enabling for individuals. Procure Copilot. You can get it for yourself. You can actually get it for free today with limited API calls, just to kind of dip your toe in the water to use Copilot. As long as you've got a GitHub account today, you can turn that on. I'm not going to walk through that because I don't want to stumble upon my own personal settings in my personal profile. What I did want to show, however, is at the enterprise level, what you can to do in terms of turning it on. If it's at licensing, this is the part where I always forget where settings. That's what this UI is different from the one that I've most recently been playing in. This up. I was using this as another organization I was in. Pilot, enterprise level. Copilot. And what you have the ability to do, your UI may be different. The reason why I stumbled over this one in particular is that I work with another organization externally to Microsoft. Doing it recently. The UI, this top navigation is on the right-hand side, and then these end up being sub-navigations within it. So your UI may be slightly different from this experience, depending on, in the case of the other UI, the dashboard that I've been working in, that organization was on the old organization plan, and then they were just recently upgraded to the enterprise one, so that might be a different dashboarding experience altogether. Point being is that in this case, under policies, you have the ability to activate or deactivate Copilot, and you get to choose in terms of which organization you're related to then turn on the type of Copilot license. So there's business and enterprise. Business is a good one to start out with. It gives you a number of bells and whistles. Enterprise gives you, um, it's still experimental, but like customized models should you need that kind of thing. It's an expensive operation. Mileage may vary. You might run through multiple tests to retrain the model or fine tune it. It also provides knowledge bases and other things in there as well. So keep that in mind. That's at a higher tier. But business, everything I showed you tonight is available in business, right? At least right now in terms of um, all the preview features. Good to go there. What this does at an enterprise level is just to activate, like say, you have multiple organizations in your company. Cool. Which ones actually get the license or don't, depending, right? I've got business and enterprise here. This one down here doesn't have any access whatsoever, so forth. Okay, but you don't issue out the licenses at this level to the individuals. You do that at org level itself. So from that perspective, but go to organizations. I just done it down there. Go back to DevGBB, which is the team. Nope, developer experience team that I'm on today. In here itself, I can then go to settings, and then from here I can go to Copilot, go to access, and then I can assign seats. I don't have any, in this case, assigned to anyone here because we already get access through other organizations inside this enterprise, as an example, which is a note to make. You can, as an organization, in multiple organizations, like if I existed in multiple orgs within the same enterprise, I could have been assigned a Copilot seat in a different organization. This is all reconciled behind the scenes for you, right? So one organization administrator may not know that I've already been assigned a seat in a different org, right? It is only charged once, so it gets reconciled behind the scenes. If I'm issued it in multiple organizations, I'm not charged 5 times, or my company is not charged 5 times, just the once, and the billing is rolled up at the enterprise level. In that sense, okay. So that's enabling or activating it on a user level, on enterprise level. For your own personal one, you can go into your account, right? I'm not going to stumble through this because I want to accidentally expose something I shouldn't have while going through it. But you can procure Copilot for individual in there, or just go to copilot.github.com and start signing up for the trial yourself. Okay. Is there any benefit to assign a person to multiple orgs? Yeah, depending on how the structure of your company is, it should mirror that. You may have a generic engineering like core group of folks who are engineers, but they may work across multiple business units, and so those orgs may be set up to mirror the line of businesses themselves. And so having someone in multiple organizations, restricts them down to what they have access to, and so forth. So yeah, multiple orgs, a person in multiple orgs is benefit in that sense, constraining them. Oh, Copilot seats. Is there benefits in assigning them? It really is like an organizational thing, right? Like you're not going to be assigning, um, like an organization administrator will not necessarily have visual or line of sight to settings in a different org, and so it really isn't like is there a benefit to give someone multiple seats across different orgs. It's more of like structurally, we just don't have that capability to see across the org if the person has that assigned seat, right? So it's not a benefit per se, but it does ensure that if that individual does require it, given that organization, that if you assign it and they are removed from a particular org, that the continuity in that sense is maintained, that the person isn't shut off accidentally if they need to access it and then go through the whole procurement process. It's just always on for them in that sense. Okay, going back to the next step. Okay, doing good on time, but getting to the end. All right, Copilot metrics, right? So there's always a question when enabling a new tool. And again, sometimes it's a dirty secret. You're probably not measuring it today in terms of how productive are your developers, other than the fact that we're shipping product, often, hopefully, you might be watching commit rates and things like that. That's good. Like we should be seeing as like a proxy metric increased commits in an organization. But we also want, usually, from a reporting perspective, because we're investing in a new tool, what is the actual acceptance rate? So, like, what is the efficacy of this particular tool? And so, I'm not going to get into too many details about that. There are a number of blog articles out there. One from previous VP of product, Ryan Silva. I always get mixed up the last name. That's out there. You can check out that corresponds to some of those metrics and documentation around the Copilot API. You can also leverage other GitHub API endpoints to cobble together what is pertinent to you. Generally speaking, the conversation then gets into Dora and space metrics and things like that, which are great. A great way to kind of help define what it is that you should be measuring if you're not already measuring today in terms of developer productivity. But it ultimately does come down, in my opinion, qualitative surveys to send out to your developer community. You're going to mix reviews, right? They're optional surveys. Developers may or may not want to respond to it. Gentle nudge to say it does help to understand if this is the right tooling, what have you, but it needs to be done. That said, from an implementation perspective, in terms of, hey, it's great that we expose, GitHub is an API first company. We have the endpoints that you can consume from to get the metrics out. You may not be in the business of building the dashboard yourself, and so there are tools out there from a third-party perspective that you can procure and measure productivity beyond GitHub. But you can also deploy these demo implementations. There are a number of them already out there. One from Octodemo.org, GitHub Copilot Resources org. There's one from Microsoft itself. There's even a Power BI here. This should have been a separate line item. This is a Power BI. I'll put it in the comments in the future in GitHub repo. There are a number of ways to procure this. So if I go back in here, this is where I wanted to kind of show some of this. Here's like one Copilot metrics dashboard. Here shows, again, adoption rate, active users, acceptance average, et cetera, et cetera. Go back to this previous one. This is another one by good folks at Octodemo, who run the Octodemo org at GitHub. This also has its own metric viewpoint of how to implement this. You can modify it accordingly. This is the Microsoft one. It shows even the architecture of how it can be run and tap into App Insights for reporting, etc. Different UI visualization. But you'll notice also it includes like acceptance rate, etc. Nothing different there. And finally, GitHub Copilot Metrics is available as a Power BI app itself, so you can install if you use Power BI. So maybe on sort of a non-developer side, you don't want to deploy a container or click the deploy to Azure button, so to speak. Power BI is available for you for that as well. Gene, let's see. GitHub salesperson said that you can't use user level metrics, but only metrics for the org. Is that true? Correct. There isn't a user level Copilot metric in that sense, right? That's for privacy and what have you reasons. I also would say that measuring it at a granular level probably isn't the intended thing that you're measuring. I think at an aggregate overall is good. I think there are other ways to measure an individual if that's what you're after. But from a Copilot perspective, I'm not there's no way to see the acceptance rates for an individual. That all bubbles up to org level overall. Good that way they can't see me slacking. Yeah, that is the concern. I guess the metric there is that if you are overusing Copilot, I guess, is that you're not doing your job. I guess I don't know, but yeah, I mean, the more and more these agents come to play, again, that level of effectiveness that it will change. It's not like you're doing less of writing the code. You're doing more of the managing of how that code is written, right? It's a higher level of working with it. I mean, it's going to change over time. It's just going to get somewhat easier. I would say the thing that I'm looking forward to is that it will actually free me up to learn and be productive at a much lower level. Like I've always been interested in, and probably because I've got nothing better to do outside of playing Legos with my kids and stuff like that. But I've always been interested in like kernel level stuff. Never really got into it. Don't have the formal degree in it. but I feel like being able to manage projects at that higher level will give me the freedom to do a lot of the undiagnosed ADHD stuff that I've always wanted to do, and be more productive in a different way. I think more usage equals higher effectiveness. At least that's my opinion. Yeah, Gene, I totally would agree with that. So, okay, 8:23, doing pretty good with this time thing. There's the audience we have. Thanks for everyone who's stuck on. I know I prattle on, so for the future meetup groups in person, I will curate or invite folks to to speak instead of just myself. This was kind of a thing to push myself to get back into meetup groups here in Toronto. I used to run mobile startups, um, 10 years ago before I joined Microsoft, and wanted to get back into the community after all the things that have gone. So I appreciate you folks joining and hope to see you all in person. And I'll make them hybrid because I've got the gear to set that up. All right. So for all the 10 concurrent viewers at the moment who stuck on, thank you for staying on for an hour and a half. The last thing I wanted to note is that there is, in fact, a GitHub Copilot cert. So that should be right here. If you are interested in taking the exam, you can do so. There may be, ways for you to, do this in certain scenarios, paid for by certain events, whatnot. Your organization can pay for it. Um, there are associated learning paths to Copilot, right? Study guide on learn.microsoft.com, etc. So do check it out. Is it fully necessary for you to be certified in this? I mean, it's one of those things I've found interesting when working with customers is that um, there seems to be a bit of a, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or maybe it's just a workflow change or difference in terms of chatting with something in a chat. There are people out there which may not, this doesn't feel natural to them in terms of this UI or experience. So keep that in mind. The certification may help for those folks. So if you do know someone who would benefit from taking a certification, I've got mixed feelings about certifications. I'll be honest, personal opinion, not you know not my day job opinion, my own personal. Um, they're great to kind of level set and to verify that you have at least a base level of knowledge, but nothing beats, in my opinion, just hands-on experience. Break the thing and know how to work with it, or if it's working against you. Like the biggest thing about working with large language models is this whole idea of prompt engineering. I know eyes would probably roll about it. Um, that is sort of the direction that things are going, and I would akin it to personal communication skills, right? The thing or person really, like if we anthropomorphize GitHub Copilot, it can only do a task as good as I've described what I need it to do. And so there's a lot of nuance in terms of how do I structure a task. You see different prompt engineering patterns out there, like chain of thought, and list goes on and on. There's one. There's a video out there by a peer of mine, David Barkle, around the idea of what was the term again? I've already forgotten. Um, a mixture of experts. So you can tell the Copilot or the LLM really behind the scenes, like, I want you to be, in his example, like, I want you to be Socrates, or take on the role of a particular philosopher and provide me information based on their known viewpoint or the way that they would um, respond. So kind of similarly here, you could create a context, and there's a way also, mind you, you can set rules for the Copilot, which I didn't show today. Again, future meetup. You can set a context for the Copilot to say every time you respond, be a, be, I want to pick on Linus Torvalds, right? Or I'm trying to think of like another developer who's like well known. I'm not gonna pick anyone, but in their context of knowledge or reference, create a response accordingly. And so there's nuances at that level in terms of how to interact with them, how would you speak to them, the level of detail required. So that is information that is, or a skill set that is developing. Of course, the models themselves will get better and better to pick up on your meaning. Semantic meaning is another thing you'll hear often. And there's also been cases where customers have asked, like, hey, do we create a centralized repository for all these prompts? I would probably steer away from that because it's hard to maintain code in general as it is, let alone prompts, because the prompts themselves um, will evolve over time, and how you write things that may be unnatural. Also, mind you, prompts don't have to be in English. English is essentially my first language. I could have written this in French or Spanish, so the prompts in that sense aren't um, should not be like written in stone. There might be a good documentation or guidance of how to ask questions, but they will morph over time because the efficacy of the prompt itself will be changing, and the models themselves will change and be better. And so the prompt may actually get worse, if that makes any sense, because I'm asking, like it again, not in such a way that the model might interpret it correctly, right? Because it's treated like a new person or a different person as they change out. Okay, that's it. We got like no minutes left, but I'll stay on anyways for a few more. And then Brock and Gene, thank you guys for the questions tonight. Brock, you got one. Last one. LOL. Now I need to try asking Copilot to act like Linus to just see how harsh of a feedback I can get. Yeah, let's do this live. Let's see. Your Linus uh, Torvalds. Hopefully I butcher his name. I hate to pick on someone so well known to kind of in this scenario and see what the Copilot thinks, but please give me feedback on what's been written. Could be very funny. It's probably gonna be pretty funny in terms of how harsh this arbitrary or contrived repo it is. Yeah, so you can ask it accordingly. So like what it generates back as a result of this will be different. The real scenario I should have done is, you are a principal DevOps engineer, right? Um, immediately flamed of you for using Java instead of C. Absolutely. Although I think Linus has backed Rust in recent days or years. That said, here like it's not providing code necessarily as a response. It's a critique, a thoughtful critique, and worded in a particular person's voice in that sense, right? I mean, how accurate is this voice? I don't know, but it can do that. So again, the scenario should have. Oops, I just dropped my pen. Um, the scenario should have been something like, um, if you were a principal DevOps engineer or platform engineer, what are the things that I can do to improve deploying this application? And so, from that sense, it would be quite a bit different, right? In terms of response, it'll probably generate like Terraform, GitHub Actions, workflow, or whatever your CI/CD runner of choice is. It'll start generating in that context, and provide you information accordingly. So keep that in mind. Your prompt will change. Storing a centralized prompt repository. Use them again as tutorials, demos, but they shouldn't be like every time I'm asking a question about how do I write a controller or a model, refer to this prompt. That is an anti-pattern. Like don't do that. That's going to be a problem for you in the long run, right? I'm not gonna read through this like that's okay. Yeah. So there's some critique about Java Maven, but yeah, that's it for tonight. That's the meetup. I want to thank the good folks at GitHub who on the shoulders of giants, the Octodemo crew over at GitHub who created a lot of the code that we use as field engineers out there. Check out Octodemo. You can see the good folks. Many to enumerate through to thank, and then also the folks who support these meetups to attend. The what I'm seeing here, eight viewers who are still here at an hour and a half me going on. Hope to see you in person, and also partners that we have out there. I know there's folks like Errol and Dan at DOps who have always raised their hands to help organize and run the event, but through my chaos, we didn't get together on this particular one. But in the future, we'll have them in, and then anyone in the community, if you've got something you want to talk about in terms of course, GitHub, because it's a meetup group, really around like DevOps, platform engineering, software best practices. I don't want to limit it to that. Not by any means about GitHub exclusively, right? I mean, it should be sort of tangential to it. But yeah, hope to see you all in person at the next event next month. Hopefully, we can secure a spot that aligns with time being there and space availability. Probably at the Toronto Microsoft office at down CIBC building, one of the new ones. But we'll see. Thanks for joining. Awkward ending to the video. Till next time. Thanks. Bye.